All right, we can go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to be kicking off our event titled Mitigating Food Waste and Expert Panel Discussion. We have invited some amazing speakers today, and you'll get to hear from them, and there'll be a Q&A, so you can ask your questions to them. And this event is part of the Time for Change Sustainability Week at OSU, and it's being organized by two student organizations, No Food Waste and Citation Needed. Our speakers were kind enough to rejoin us this year after the event was canceled last year because of the pandemic. So we are very excited to hear from all of you. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Aishwarya Badikar, and I'm the current president and co-founder of No Food Waste. We are a group of students at Ohio State focused on reducing, repurposing, and educating about food waste on campus. One of our main missions is to increase awareness about the food waste problem, and this event is part of our education and outreach efforts. We also work towards redirecting food waste from the landfills through our repurposing and composting initiatives. For example, last week we launched our compost drop-off program in collaboration with OSU's Zero Waste team. And this program is allowing the OSU community to drop off their organic waste on campus at a subsidized rate. To learn more about this program, you can follow us on social media at No Food Waste or check out our website. We are also excited to partner with another student organization, Citation Needed, and now Danielle Watts will share what Citation Needed is about. Danielle?
Yeah, thank you so much, Aishwarya. My name's Danielle Voss, and I'm the current president of Citation Needed this semester. So our organization, we're a registered student organization at Ohio State, and we're open to students of all majors, but our focus is on communicating science. So our main goal is to is on focusing on effectively communicating science. And we do this through a mix of opportunities for students to converse and hear more about like hot topic issues like food waste, like we're doing today, but also having seminars on learning new methods to communicate science. So we have a variety of things. We just published a podcast. We do regular social media posts, and we had some more documentary screenings or more formal presentations from professional communicators. So if you're interested in being more involved with us, my email's on the slide, or else follow us on our social media sites to learn about some of our upcoming events about communicating science. Thanks.
Thanks, Danielle. Just a quick note to the attendees, you can use the chat function to introduce yourself and keep the conversation going about food waste. And if you have any questions for our panelists, you can use the Q&A feature on Zoom, and your questions will be answered at the end of the event. Today's event is going to be moderated by Katie Williamson. She's a PhD student in the food science department at Ohio State University, and she's also the co-founder of No Food Waste. Katie, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thanks, Aishwarya. Hi, everyone. We're happy to be here today and happy to have all of you here. And also a big thank you to all of our panelists for making the time to do this event virtually. As Aishwarya mentioned, we were going to do this last year and then COVID happened. So we're really, really happy that we were able to bring this together. So our speakers have created some slides that they're going to share with you. But first, I just want to do just a brief introduction of what we're seeing on the slide today. So we have 6 panelists today. One, we have Dr. Brian Rowe. He's a professor of agricultural, environmental, and development economics here at OSU. He also is the director of the OSU Food Waste Collaborative, and he is the No Food Waste Club advisor. So he's been really supportive in all of this, and we're happy to have him here to talk to us. We also have Christy Cook. She is the former VP of Customer Success at LeanPath, and I'm sure she'll give a little bit more of information on what LeanPath does related to food waste. She's also the founder and CEO of Invest Her Strategies. We have Alex Carr here today. He's the current president of the OSU chapter of the Food Recovery Network. Then we have Kari Armbruster. She is the Kroger Zero Hunger, Zero Waste project manager. We have Lucy Schroder, and she is the SWACO Food Waste Initiative Coordinator. And if anyone does not know what SWACO stands for, that's the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio. And then finally, we have Dave Daniel, and he is the Mid-Ohio Food Bank Senior VP of Operations. So we'll start with Dr. Rowe. If you want to give a little introduction, I think most of the panelists have prepared slides too. So.
Yeah, let's see. Can you all see the slides here? Let me see if I can get these. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks to No Food Waste for organizing this great event. And thanks for the 40 attendees out there who have fought off Zoom burnout to be here. And I really appreciate that you are here. So let me see. It says my screen sharing is paused. Let me make sure I've got it going. How does that look? Catherine, is that clear?
Perfect, yep.
Awesome. Well, I'm representing the Ohio State Food Waste Collaborative today. I'll note our mission is to help kind of carry on the conversation of food waste here in the Central Ohio area through research, through outreach, through working through students, staff, community members, faculty members here in Central Ohio and around the Ohio State University. Trying to keep that conversation going. And just a brief note, we're in mourning for Mike Long, one of our original Food Waste Collaborative board members who passed away earlier this year. He was a great soul, very important, the original SWACO executive director, I believe, and was a lecturer here at Ohio State University and was very integrative in many waste reduction activities in the state of Ohio. So just like to give him a little recognition for a great career of work, and he'll be missed. But today what I'd like to do, because I'd like to share some of the research efforts that our groups, various people in the Ohio State Food Waste Collaborative are working on in terms of research. A lot of work on understanding consumers' food waste as the last link in the chain of the food system. Consumers are oftentimes the weakest link in that food supply chain as well. And so we're taking several approaches to try to improve the data in this space, including starting to nationally track food waste through an online survey. We've got a couple of quarters under our belts, and we're looking to keep that type of measurement going so we have an understanding of overall trends at the national level. At this point, there isn't a consistent national tracking of food waste by any means. We hope to fill that void. We hope to intersperse that with some deep dives using our Food Image smartphone app, where we, through research expenditures, through grants and contracts, hope to be able to look more deeply and look at interventions of reduction of food waste in consumers' homes and use this app as a means to both measure the success of those and actually implement some of those. Plus, as Lucy might talk about later, we're involved in some community level analysis of consumer level food waste reduction campaigns as well. We're also starting a couple of new initiatives looking at the interaction between, hey, can you reduce food waste without compromising nutrition? And specifically looking at the interaction of reduction of food waste while also maintaining high levels of nutrition through consuming fruits and vegetables. As fruits and vegetables are one of the most wasted elements at the consumer level, we want to make sure that simple admonitions to reduce food waste doesn't lead to reducing fruit and vegetable intake. And so we've got a couple of research designs going on to make sure that's not happening and see if we can forward both those goals simultaneously rather than having them be competitive. Our group is also very busy looking at issues in terms of date labeling.
Which oh, Dr. Rowe. this is going to be a challenge that I'm sure all of us face with the internet.
And I got kicked off, and now I'm back.
Now you're
So
back.
I'll jump back in.
Okay.
And I'll just a couple more slides, and then I'll turn it off to the next person. And we're also doing some exploration of household food waste in China and finding some very interesting results here, where the prevailing wisdom is as the income in a country goes up, there's typically more food waste. We actually found that in China over the years from 1991 to 2009, as incomes tripled across China, we actually found that food waste declined by almost 1/4 on a per person basis. So trying to reconcile this and see what implications this might hold for global food waste patterns. But we're very
I think that that's on his end. It's hard to tell with only one panelist on here. But if that, I think that was the last slide that Dr. Rowe was going to present. So Christy, if you want to go ahead.
Can you hear me and see me? I just want to make sure it's not me either.
Yes, I know. It's hard to tell when it's only one screen.
Yes. All right. No problem. I'll begin to share my screen then, and we will keep going. Of course. Very exciting. All right. Let me know when you can see it. That would be helpful for me.
We can see it.
All right. Great. That sounds awesome. Thanks. So first of all, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here today. And finally that we're getting Time for Change Week. That's exciting. I've been in the field of sustainability and food waste since about 2003. I really started that career with Sodexo, a food and facilities management company. And I was the first person ever hired in the field of sustainability. It was really before even an office of sustainability was invented then, which was great, at least for our company. So I'm really excited because I think that shows my tenacity. And that's also what I want students and everybody to take away is tenacity during this Time for Change Week. So I also led the global roadmap work for implementing zero waste for Sodexo in the 80 countries where they operated at that time. And that was great work that led me to my strong ties in Columbus. I moved here in 2008. At that time, Sodexo was running the food service operations for the stadium and other areas. So I led the back of the house, if you will, composting collection at that time and started the processage, which was a lot of fun, continues on today. And I also had a great opportunity. I really stress community, but being a part of the Columbus Local Organizing Committee that brought the Women's Final Four here in 2018. I bring that up because we just had a Women's Final Four and the Men's Final Four last night, which was great. And so far, it's still the most sustainable Women's Final Four to date. And we had a lot of community aspects that we offset with tree planting, creating green space. It was just so much fun. And kind of random, but I've gotten multiple questions on my LinkedIn this week about asking, if you're a farmer in training, what does that mean? And I love being outside, growing things. Sustainability is really important to me personally. And so grow my own food as much as I can, try to live those values, which is so much fun. But I am the former vice president of customer success for LeanPath. I still stay very involved with LeanPath and highly connected. At LeanPath, our mission is to make food waste prevention and measurement everyday practices in the world's kitchen. We believe that tracking and measurement is the most effective way to prevent food waste. And we want to make sure that my role at that time was also to make sure we were effectively preventing food waste and that customers were meeting their goals as well. So food waste, many cases when you're thinking about kitchens, it's the elephant in the room. It doesn't matter. It's the thing that people don't exactly want to talk about, whether they think there is food waste or not. But in most cases, they don't really know how much it is. So at LeanPath, we believe that if you're measuring your food waste, then you can talk about how big that elephant is. What is the scope of our problem? And then being able to create interventions to address that problem. We like to work at the top of the food waste hierarchy. That's focused on the prevention area and has the biggest environmental community impact. We work with restaurants, grocery stores, community kitchens, but we really focus on large food service organizations overall. We believe that's where the majority of the scale is. And so that's where we're working there. We tracking food waste though in kitchens overall, it's challenging because the food service team, they have a lot going on. They want to make sure that customers are enjoying the food experiences and they're taking care of their employees. But along that, we like to, of course, make them think about food waste. And so in order to do that, we have to solve those problems of the difficult to measure. It's difficult to analyze that data, and it might be hard to engage the staff. So we've tried to make it easy. We want to conquer those challenges. We have a quick and easy way overall to track food waste, as well as to discover and understand the prevention opportunities and take action. That way, the team members can see the results, and the results are part of what's so important when we're thinking about tracking, because it's really the secret ingredient to make the magic happen. If you know what the problem is, it creates awareness. And with 1 in 7 people in Ohio not knowing where their next meal is coming from, preventing food waste is something I believe everyone can relate to. If you're able to look around the Zoom room in a little bit, you'll see some faces, and most likely one of those people sitting next to you at some point has been food insecure. I was as well. It's part of what's important to me. So we have a suite of packages at LeanPath to assist kitchens, no matter the size of the kitchen, all the way up to post-consumer education. Again, we just want to make sure it's easy. LeanPath consists of hardware. You can see some pictures here where we can take a picture. You place the food waste on the scale, you take a picture of that. It goes to our software where the data is analyzed. And then we have the ability to talk about the discovery. When the data is analyzed, it goes into our database, and our software automatically delivers actionable solutions and insights. And discovering those insights then drive us to action and results. So lots to unpack here, but I just want to give you an overview of how it works. A little bit more about LeanPath is that we are in every food service segment that's out there. We're in over 40 countries and over 2,500 customers worldwide. We have a global presence with teams across the world. And some of those organizations we work for or work with are Google Cafe, saving 6 million pounds of food waste and should say preventing in cafes, as well as other companies and organizations like IKEA, just right up the road, up I-71, healthcare, different education, and really hospitality. So pretty much we're trying to fight food waste wherever it's happening at a large scale. Since 2014, we've helped clients prevent 28 million kilograms of food waste. That's about 31,000 tons since 2014. And I do want to share this quote. I heard this quote from Jerry. I'm totally giving Jerry credit for this. He's the former director of energy and environment at the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. I met him in Columbus. He was also the chief sustainability officer of Denver, but I loved this quote. Thought leaders produce great thoughts. Mechanics turn great thoughts into great outcomes, and I'm a mechanic. And so I kind of want to leave this statement here for you as you're thinking about a time to change. And I hope you're having big thoughts because big thoughts are great too. When you pair it with action, it's incredibly powerful. So be powerful, take action, and that would be what I encourage you to do. Thank you very much. And I'll hand it back over to you, Katie, for the next speaker.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Next, we'll have Alex. Go ahead and present.
Hey, everyone. All right, let's see. All right, can we all see that?
Yep.
Perfect. So hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Carr. I'm an undergrad here at Ohio State, 4th year studying mechanical engineering. I'm current co-president of the Ohio State chapter of the Food Recovery Network, and I've been involved in the OSU FRN since spring 2018. So this is my 3rd year in the organization, and I've hit on a bunch of different roles during my time there. So what is the Food Recovery Network. Simply put, our mission statement is fighting waste, feeding people. We are a national organization that has chapters at over 140 or so different colleges and universities across America. We're just one small chapter. And what do? We have a multi-hat approach. We do daily pickups from Ohio State dining locations, mostly grab-and-go cafes, coffee houses, marketplace, things like that. A lot of prepackaged excess food that couldn't be sold and the tradition locations would otherwise dispose of them. We take that and we donate it to and bring it to local food banks and other organizations that need that around Columbus. We also do food waste data tracking. Since we've begun tracking data about a couple of years ago, we've accounted for over 15,000 pounds that we do not at this point pick up from tradition locations or a lot of the other locations on Ohio State. So that's probably not nearly as much as food waste as there is at Ohio State in general. We host educational events with speakers and things like that in collaboration with other student organizations. And then we do collaborative projects. So a couple initiatives we've worked on in the past. We were the beneficiary of a grant from the 2018 OSEP Smart Campus Challenge, which was a roundtable venture capital style pitch where sustainability-minded student organizations could propose projects and get funding for that. We won funding to purchase an electric vehicle for our pickup so that our volunteers, student volunteers, could get around between all of our locations and our off-campus partners. And the second part of that money we used to develop a software program to help collect data and give that back to universities so they'd have a better understanding of what food they're wasting and perhaps adjust ordering patterns to not, have as much food waste. In other projects, we collaborated with Seventh Son Brewing Company to create a beer out of excess bagels at the university called Close the Loop Kvass. We are collaborating currently with No Food Waste to do another upcycle program to create bagel chips out of a lot of other wasted bread products. You'll notice a trend here. Bagel products and bread products are usually the biggest thing that we see given to us from all of our partner locations. And we do large end of semester pickups from traditions and things like Buckeye-thon and stuff like that. So what are we working on currently? So right now, actually, we have a virtual food drive going in collaboration with the Buckeye Food Alliance. If you're interested, you can download the Food Forest app and make a donation. It's very simple. It's very much like Instacart or something like that, where you go, pick out what you want and make a donation, but all of that goes towards the Buckeye Food Alliance in general. And then we're collaborating with that with an app called Food Forest. And then secondly, we are working on expanding our software platform. The platform that we currently use is just for Ohio State Food Recovery Network, but we've been in talks with a national organization and they're interested in bringing it to more chapters. So we're working on filling out a grant application in conjunction with Dr. Rowe, who is also our advisor. Shout out Dr. Rowe, he's amazing. And yeah, so we're hoping that we get some legs on this and it goes pretty far. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Next, we'll have Kari. Go ahead and share her screen. Thanks, Kari.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. Really excited to be here. My name is Kari Armbruster. I lead Zero Hunger, Zero Waste for Kroger. I've been with Kroger for 8 years now, and I have been leading the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste program since we launched back in 2017. So Zero Hunger, Zero Waste for Kroger was really a culmination of a lot of work that we've been doing behind the scenes. So we've been a company fighting hunger since we started over 138 years ago. And we had actually already established a zero waste goal prior to launching Zero Hunger, Zero Waste. And so as we thought about those two mutual efforts, we really wanted to connect them in together because we felt very strongly if we came out and said we were striving towards zero hunger, we could not also be a company that was wasting food. So we joined those two missions and came up with this social impact plan, Zero Hunger, Zero Waste. We launched in 2017, but we really had started working on this back in 2016. It took a full year of development, which is really important for a big company like Kroger to engage a lot of different stakeholders, both internally and externally. So for Zero Hunger, Zero Waste for us was a effort that took a lot of thought and a lot of processing with partners like the World Wildlife Fund and Feeding America. really guiding us along the way. We're so passionate about making sure that any food that comes into our system is used to its highest purpose, which is to feed people. So we have a process in the store where we talk about, first we try and sell the product, right? So first and foremost, we're a food company that's trying to feed Americans. So we first attempt to sell the product. We can't sell that, we mark it down in store and offer it at a lower price to hopefully fit into more budgets. And then if we can't sell it that way, we donate it. So we have a partnership with Feeding America where we donate food. And then if we can't do that, if for some reason that food is not eligible for donation, we do have food waste recycling programs in over 85% of our stores at this point, striving towards 100% soon. But that's really the crux of Zero Hunger, Zero Waste from an operational perspective, is making sure that our stores are able to donate surplus food if we have it, and then if they can't donate it, make sure that we have an alternative to the landfill, because we really are striving to that zero food waste to landfill goal by 2025. We've been on that journey for a few years now, and we've seen tremendous momentum and success. So we have decreased the overall food waste footprint of our company by 13% in our first 2 years, and increased the amount that we've captured of that surplus food for recycling programs by 18% in our first 2 years. We're still waiting on 2020 data. Everything's a little bit behind this year. With COVID, we've had a lot of stuff going on. But for Kroger, like I said, feeding people is really what we're about. So the primary driver of the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste program in stores is food rescue. Mid-Ohio Food Bank is one of our key partners, but we have partners all across the country. Over 100 food banks and many, many more agencies that pick up food from our stores. That equaled 100 million pounds in 2019, and we're on track to be just under that for 2020 as we review all of that data. So it is a huge mover of food for us, and we are looking for ways to improve that program each and every day, partnering with organizations like Mid-Ohio, educating our associates on what's able to be donated, and making sure that we have someone there to collect it each and every day and get it out to the people that need it the most. So for us, food rescue is just such a primary driver and really makes our people feel good. And it's a great way to move surplus food into another space where it can still go to feeding people. On the side of recycling, if we cannot get it to feed people, we do a lot of different programs such as composting, anaerobic digestion, or an animal feed program. So that is across the country. We have all 3 of those running in various geographies just based on what's available locally. And so as a company, we are hitting about 50% of the surplus food that isn't used to feed people is getting recycled today, striving towards that 100% by 2025. So that's what we're doing inside of our stores. What we're doing outside of our stores is really important too. So as a thought leader in the hunger and waste space, we are driving awareness through programs like the Refed Insights Engine. If you haven't been to refed.org, please go visit. It's a tremendous resource. They launched the Insights Engine back in February of this year, and it's just an incredible wealth of knowledge. This is one screenshot of it. We help fund this through the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste Foundation, which is a key philanthropic part of the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste mission, and it helps to really drive awareness and engagement and prevention. So we can't act on something if we can't measure it. LeanPath talked about how they're doing measurement to help spur on action. Refed's really focused on driving awareness so that we can drive action externally as well. Another really amazing program from the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste Foundation is our innovation fund. So when we launched, we had a $10 million innovation fund. And from that, we are looking to fund startups and innovators that are tackling food waste in new and exciting ways. Food Forest is on the list. I saw Alex just mentioned them. They're a tremendous organization that actually started here in Cincinnati and is growing really rapidly. We're really helping to seed fund these organizations to get them up and running. Some of these are much bigger already. So Imperfect Foods is a massive organization that has really grown exponentially. And they're designed to take surplus food and distribute it through food boxes that people can order. It's really a gourmet service. These products that they're getting from farm just, are off-size or something that retail typically wouldn't bring in. So they're offering an outlet to these suppliers to still move that product, and it's amazing quality. So it's a really great organization looking to reduce food waste that way. And then we've got organizations like Ripe Revival, who's taking farm level surplus and turning it into a nutrient-rich gummy to be actually sold in stores. So they're creating a brand new product to bring to market through upcycling, which is really exciting. Take a look at the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste Foundation.org as well. You can read more about these amazing organizations. We actually just closed application period on our second cohort that we launched earlier this year. So really excited to see who our next round of innovators will be. That will be announced in the coming months, but that group is really focused on more of that upcycling effort and the circularity of food. And one of the ways we're also driving innovation is through our merchandising team and organizations like Appeal. So we're bringing Appeal products to customers across the country today through avocados, limes, and apples. And this is a organic plant-based coating that is placed on these products at the supplier level. So when it gets to our stores, it's got that protective barrier that helps increase freshness. And it also helps increase freshness at your home. So these are freshness extenders that we've seen really great success with. And it's a way that we can help our customers also reduce food waste in their own homes. And another engagement point for us is our suppliers. So we joined the World Resources Institute and the 10 by 20 by 30 initiative, where we've engaged 20 of our suppliers to commit to reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. And lastly, I'll just talk really quickly about date labeling. I think Brian touched on it a little bit and might have gotten cut off, but it is a big opportunity to help our customers. So Kroger standardized the date labels on our brand's products. In 2019, we started that journey. We have, it's coming to close here shortly, but really for us, that's about meeting industry standards. So you can go to any store and see a consistent labeling system, which will indicate either safety with a use by label or quality with a best if used by. And so those are some of the ways Kroger is hoping to engage the broader community in the journey of zero hunger, zero waste. And I'll stop sharing. There you go.
Awesome. Thanks for that info. Next, we'll have Lucy go ahead and present.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Let's see, sharing my screen. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep, looks good.
Great. Thanks, Katie. So yeah, my name is Lucy Schroder. I'm Food Waste Initiative Coordinator with SWACO. That's the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio. So we're the government entity who is responsible for the waste stream here in Franklin County. And that includes all kinds of waste diversion, everything from the recycling that you put out at your curb every week to e-waste, household hazardous waste, as well as composting and food waste, obviously. And so I specialize in the food waste topics and have been working mostly on this Central Ohio Food Waste Initiative. So what we did is we had this interest as an organization. We knew that we have a goal. We want to reach 75% diversion of all waste from our landfill here in Franklin County by 2032. And as we were breaking down our waste stream to say, okay, how are we going to get to that? We realized that 15% of the waste stream is food, actually. And so that makes food the #1 material coming into the landfill, as well as if you break that out to the day, that's 1 million pounds of food coming into the landfill every single day. And so that's just here in Franklin County. We're one community in one state. And so just thinking about the scale of food waste across the country, when you build that out, it's hard to comprehend. So we're looking to do our little part through the Central Ohio Food Waste Action Plan. And that includes, as a group, we pulled together 200 organizations or individuals from across the region who touch the food waste stream. We have many of our partners, Kroger, Mid-Ohio Food Bank, OSU, are on this call today. And so we identified 20 solutions together of how we're going to reach 50% food waste reduction by 2030. And so really excited, we launched that action plan in 2019. And this summer, we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary since that launch. And so we'll be sharing all kinds of updates and data around our progress in the region. And so, yes, here's that action plan that I mentioned. It covers solutions, everything from prevention to rescue and recovery. And so these 20 solutions span those topic areas because we know that we can't solve it all with just one area. A lot of people associate food waste reduction, especially when it comes to the landfill, with composting, but there's so much more to it, as many of our other speakers have already mentioned. And so we do that, especially we recently launched a food waste awareness campaign for our region called Save More Than Food. And it's all about helping our residents understand that wasted food is wasted resources. So when you throw away a meal, you're not just throwing away the opportunity to eat the food on your plate, you're also wasting the soil that was, and nutrients and land space that were used to grow that food. You're wasting the water and other environmental resources, as well as the money that was spent, both not just by you, but all the corporations who had to pay the laborers and transportation costs and manufacturing and all of the above, as well as the energy that goes into transporting our food all around the world to get to our plates. And then last, but certainly not least, is the opportunity. So when we reduce our food waste in our own lives, we open up opportunities to feed members of our community, much like Kari was talking about with Zero Hunger, Zero Waste. And so I mentioned we have this goal of reaching 50% food waste reduction by 2030. And we're reaching that goal through a number of outlets. We have partnerships with food businesses locally to help them see what it looks like to implement everything from prevention to compost to food donation, actually implementing that in their business. SWACO takes on the funds that are required to get those practices in place, so that we can learn from their experience and share that with other food businesses across the region. We also have food donations working group working with partners like Mid-Ohio Food Bank and others to see what are these opportunities where we have excess food that's ready to go to people, and what can we do to get it to them before it becomes waste. Other opportunities like Rev1, we've partnered with Rev1 Ventures to support food waste innovation in the region. So much like Kroger and Zero Hunger, Zero Waste, we know that this innovation is out there in the food waste space, and we want to help those innovators come into Central Ohio and implement their innovations here. So there's potential funding available, and even for local entrepreneurs, if there's anyone on the call who has a great idea for food waste, I'd recommend that you plug in with our partnership with Rev1. There are going to be opportunities coming up. We're making announcements even in the next couple weeks about opportunities to get your ideas off the ground. Another area of focus is we know that, especially around this compost space, there is some food waste like orange peels, avocado pits, all those types of things that cannot be avoided. And so composting is a really important issue. SWACO is taking the lead on developing in our organics management planning for the region. So we're taking a look at what it means to bring a compost infrastructure that'll serve the entire region to Central Ohio. And so that's a big area of work, but really exciting. It'll put Central Ohio kind of on the leading end of this type of infrastructure for food waste diversion. And then last but not least, we have partnerships with NRDC and World Wildlife Fund, Kroger, all types of organizations who are helping us reach food waste diversion through all kinds of exciting projects. And so I'll touch on a couple more of them as we go along here, but I would encourage you to go to savemorethanfood.org to learn more about all of our activities, but also how you can make a difference. We have pages dedicated to what you can do at home, at work, at school, and in food businesses to divert food waste, and connecting you with local resources to help you get started. And so with that, I'll pass it off to our next speaker.
Awesome, thanks, Lucy. Last but not least, we have Dave.
Terrific.
Do you want to share? Or do you want us to share? Okay.
Sure. I think I can try to pull it off here. We'll see how it goes. But hey, thank you so much for inviting me. Really happy to be part of this this discussion. And again, glad to see that as Dr. Rowe was talking about, 56 folks now have given up their time to come out and be part of this. So certainly glad to do that. So a little bit about me and a little bit about about the Mid-Ohio Food Bank, now the Mid-Ohio Food Collective. So again, my entire career has been involved in feeding people one way or another. I spent the first 40 years in the supermarket industry working for a privately held company who was heavily devoted to serving their community. And as they've often described, food banking was in their DNA. I've since retired, but stayed very active with the Mid-Ohio Food Bank, so much so that they got me back into the workforce. And I've been now employed by the food bank after serving on their board for almost 20 years. So my role is in charge of operations involving food sourcing, as well as volunteer operations. If you haven't heard, we've been voted, I think now going on 3 years in a row, the most popular place to volunteer. And one of the fun things that folks get to do there is to help sort food that Kroger and other supermarkets donate into boxes that can be distributed among the 600 agencies that we serve. So, just an idea of, donated food. About 50%, nearly 50% of what we receive and distribute here at the Mid-Ohio Food Bank is donated. And that's coming from lots of different places. When you think in terms of, I would say that almost 95% of all the food retailers out there are participating in one way or another, which certainly helps us, as well as many of the other cold storage facilities, distributors, suppliers. We're even getting food service type donations now through the pandemic as the restaurants kind of hit the wall there in the early lockdown portions. But we also, in addition to kind of recovering the finished packages, we actually work with the Ohio Association of Food Banks, who does a great job lobbying the Ohio legislature and getting donations or dollars committed directly through the annual or biannual budget. Something that not everybody knows is that Ohio is one of the very few states that does commit dollars through the legislation to help support the 12 food banks across the state. So we actually have what was referred to as the Ag Clearance Program, and we could talk a little bit more about that later on in the discussion. But we actually are able to work directly with Ohio farmers to purchase what is typically considered grade B produce. These are products that's typically a size issue. It has nothing to do with the wholesomeness or the flavor or the quality of the product. It's really, in the U.S. we eat with our eyes, and it's just not as pretty. So we work directly with these Ohio farmers and farmers that are affiliated with Ohio farmers, maybe outside of the state, to be able to purchase their products just really for the costs and the costs associated with their equipment and the boxing and so forth of this product. So we're able to acquire a product at about 26 cents a pound, which is terrific in comparison to what you might pay today in the open market.
See if Dave's camera unfreezes in a sec. Good. Gotta love these internet challenges. Oh, you're back. I think you're muted still, Dave.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, but am I back? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can now.
Okay. So again, one of the things that I'd like to share is as it says here, hunger goes beyond the plate. We've determined over the years that you cannot, food bank your way out of hunger. Generally, hunger is just a symptom of the overall issues. Finding affordable housing, healthcare, wages. It doesn't happen in isolation. So, well, one of the things we've changed our look to change this conversation. So the concept behind the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, we're not just simply a food bank anymore. While the food bank is, as it says here, the backbone of what we do, we've now incorporated an urban farm with the Mid-Ohio Farm. We are doing, basically modern farming in an urban environment. The Mid-Ohio Pharmacy, we've actually reached out to healthcare providers like Ohio State, as well as other Ohio Health and others, where we've got now doctors screening for food insecurity and writing what is typically kind of a prescription for those that are food insecure to go get the fresh and healthy foods that will help their healthcare outcomes. We've now incorporated what is known as the Mid-Ohio Kitchen, where we're taking products and turning those into prepared meals to feed, ready-to-eat meals for children, seniors, and others throughout the community. And most recently, the Mid-Ohio Market. There's one at Columbus State, one at Hart, and soon to be one with Ohio State up north, but in Marion County, which is essentially trying to turn it into a supermarket environment, taking away some of the stigma that's associated with having to go to a food pantry. So with that, I'll kind of turn it back. Thank you. And
awesome. So thank you everyone for just sharing a little bit about what you do and kind of your view on food waste. If I could ask all the panelists to turn their cameras back on now, that way we can all, since we're not in person, kind of have a conversation. Awesome. This will be easier too to tell who's having technical difficulties. So if anyone hops off, hops back on, we'll just keep going. We're gonna start, so the way I'm gonna start this, so everyone kind of presented their view on food waste. And so for all the attendees on this call, you can see that there's a lot of different points in the food chain and a lot of different points just globally where food waste occurs. So we're gonna start by having everyone just talk about like one kind of statistic that they find interesting related to kind of the magnitude of food waste that they're working with. And we're gonna start with Dr. Rowe, because as an economist, I think you have kind of a global view. Can you give us a little bit of an idea or something, just like a fact or statistic that is interesting on either the national or global scale with food waste?
Well, sure. I'll share some interesting things that we found last summer after COVID set in. We were interested to understand how this massive change in our daily lives may have affected how people deal with food and how that might contribute to food waste. And we found a very interesting item for the over 500 people that we talked to across the United States. About a third had increased the amount of cold storage that they had at home. They either added a refrigerator or added a freezer. And we thought that was very interesting. So I think a really good action item that we might want to think about as a collective community is right about now, some of those items that people may have started to panic purchase about a year ago are probably at the very bottom of those new freezers or in that additional refrigerator that we either bought or resuscitated from the garage. So now would be a great time, I think, to really urge those around us to take a close look at some of those items in our refrigerator and freezer. I always thought it'd be great to have a eat only out of your freezer day, national day. You know, they have national days that they announce. So I think it'd be great to have people kind of find all those items in their freezer. I know one of my students, Katie Bender, who's co-authored on many of the research projects, says that she's actually moved several food items from the freezer to her new locations over the years. So she's like moved with the same item of food several times. So I just think it's interesting how we store items at home and how there might be an option or elements out there that we can make sure we use all those good foods that we purchased perhaps in a panic over the next year before they go bad.
Yeah, if I can just add on to that, COVID impacts. We actually did a survey and we saw about 35% of customers responded and said that they believe their food waste has increased over the last year. And most of that is because they're cooking so much more at home. So they know what they're throwing away. It's just really interesting because in reality, their food waste impact probably hasn't shifted. It just is in a different spot. It's in their home now, right? So they're not at a restaurant sending that plate away to the back of the house to be thrown away. They're doing it in their own kitchen. So it has just really raised awareness of your own personal impact on food waste a lot in the last year, which is fascinating. And our family calls it a pantry night, where we cook whatever is left, like the can of whatever is in our pantry, because there's just so much.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Kari, actually, if you want to share, I guess that was kind of an interesting fact from Kroger. What percentage of food is wasted in retail, and what do you think are the main causes?
Yeah, it's a great question. Overall, it's hard to know a percentage in retail. Shrink is what we call surplus food that wasn't sold in the retail industry. Dave, I'm sure, is very familiar with shrink from his days at Giant Eagle, and that can vary based on your department, anywhere from as low as 2% to double digits of like 12 to 15% in other departments. So that doesn't sound like a lot. 2% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about the volumes of food moving through grocery stores, it is an incredible amount of surplus. And so for Kroger specifically, when we first tracked, we had about, I hate even saying it was like 330,000 tons of food that wasn't sold or donated to feed people. That's a very large number. And at that time, we were estimating we were diverting about 27% of that to some sort of recycling program. We have decreased it. We're now at about an estimate of 280,000 tons, and we're capturing about 45%. And so we're moving in the right direction. But, that's just Kroger. Think about all the other retailers on the planet and just that massive impact in the large number of pounds of food that just moves through that. Even that 2% can be actually a really high volume.
Dave, I think you're on mute. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that was dramatically affected by COVID was the whole touchless, delivery methods. We had to change our model in our pantries across the entire network. So we went from, in many cases, a choice model where folks were selecting the items that they knew would be right for their family, or they needed to supplement those items that they were purchasing with the dollars that they did have or with their SNAP benefits, to a situation where it's now an emergency food box. So they really don't have a lot of impact on what they're getting. So they're getting a box of food that may not be very popular with their children or with those in the household. So we try to do is get something that's basic enough that it's got some versatility that people can use it or spice it, prepare it in a way that makes sense for them. But that's the biggest challenge, I think, is the reflection and refed was the largest part of food waste is coming at the household level. And so that's, the idea of trying to get people those items. That's why we prefer the choice method. Is generally it's a way that they can kind of pick those items they know their family is going to consume. But this whole the limitations with the virus really pushed us to a situation where it's back to the emergency food box type situation. Hopefully, with the continued improvements that we're seeing, is that we'll get back to a position where folks can choose what they want.
Dave, did Mid-Ohio deal with the Farmers to Families box program as well through USDA?
Yeah,
part of that.
So we, there were various iterations. I think we're in round 5 or 6 right now. Lots of changes with respect to eligibility and where they wanted to try to target the distribution of those foods. The USDA moved very quickly in trying to develop that whole program. it had its headaches. We were able to testify to the House committee and kind of give them direct feedback on how things were going. And Marcia Fudge is, again, can't say enough about what great work she's done, and hope that she's going to continue to be able to do that in her new role. It was a terrific gift when you think in terms of, I think it's somewhere, we were able to distribute somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 million pounds just through the few, because we were not involved in all 5 of the rounds of this process. So.
Dave, do you want to give, for people maybe that aren't familiar with the USDA Farmers to Families program, do you want to give a little bit of background on what that was?
Sure. So with the introduction of the pandemic and the fact that, with all the massive shutdowns, we saw, about a 27% increase in demand and new, in families showing up for service visits across our network. And that included just, I think our most recent count was throughout the year, we saw 60,000 new families that had never entered the system, that had never stopped to go to a food bank. When you think about, what it would take, for you to vote, for those of us that are able to afford the food that we're consuming, what's it going to take to actually go in there? The statistics show that when we, prior to the pandemic, 71% of those folks that actually came to the food bank came there 5 times or less in a year. So it kind of busts the myth that there's folks that just kind of rely on us every day. It's life happens, and they've got to get through it, and they go back to work, or they go back to they paid their whatever bill, and they can go out and purchase those foods. So when the pandemic shut down all of those industries, there were so many people that are now unemployed that are now eligible to come. So what happened was the USDA was set aside some significant funding in each round, and what they did was they opened the bidding to distributors, folks. Really, strangely enough, I think there was actually a caterer in Texas that actually became a distributor of these farm to family boxes. And what they did was they went to anybody that could kind of put it together. And it was about a 25-pound box of food that included things like fresh fruit, fresh produce, or fresh vegetables, dairy, meat, and the most recent round added seafood as one of the eligible items that they could put in there. And there was no restrictions. There was no certification. Typically, if you go to a food bank, you have to self-report your income level to ensure eligibility, and you have to record where you're from. Those are the 2 restrictions that some of the USDA programs put on other TFAP and the emergency feeding program, as well as commodity supplemental feeding program, which is senior boxes. Those require signatures. These didn't. Anybody could get it. So they understood the need that was great. And again, it's a program that's started in, I want to say, first part of May, and it's still going through the end of this month. So, but it's the Farmers to Families, and that's what it was.
Awesome. Thanks. And we're kind of on this now. We've been touching a little bit on the impact of COVID. I know it's been great, and I know we talk about it a lot in a lot of meetings, but I'm also interested from Lucy and Christy's point of view. If Christy, you want to talk about how measuring in restaurants, I mean, the restaurant industry has changed drastically from COVID, and then within the past year, what is this waste measurement looked like?
Yeah, I mean, it has been, it's almost like redefining an entire segment of business and such. So to give you an idea of a couple of things that happened, it was, and just kind of the impact. And I know everybody felt impacted this time, but we're literally looking at our trackers and they're online and being used, and we're seeing the numbers going down. And some days, and you can track it by country, and you see whole countries go black. It's gone. You can look at it by industries. So you're looking at hotels, you might be looking at casinos where there are a lot of buffets, and you see these industries just you know, employees aren't working, buffets are closed, you're looking at lockdowns by countries. And, you know, at first it's also kind of scary, right? And so I think if you put those moments aside, because we know how bad it was, and what we've really looked at is what we've heard from the food service companies out there is about how they can emerge stronger. And that's really been the theme of how, what we've heard and what we've continued to do and interact, to the point where, of course, you know, we went to a lot of grab and go, because it's either COVID meals where you've got quarantines, or you just have to have a touchless type environment, or if people there's all kinds of redesign. Kind of an interesting fact, but plexiglass, of course, in some form of it that you see went up everywhere, became such a hot commodity. Obviously, because all of a sudden, all the food service organizations are buying it to separate, you know, people eating from the food service workers. So lots of unintended consequences. I'll be interesting to see what plexiglass is going to be in the future, because there's going to be something there. I hope it's good. But when we are thinking about emerging stronger, what we're seeing is we are seeing restaurants coming back. We are seeing them focus on safety in a way that is obviously stronger than ever before. But also the component to think of is that because of this awareness during COVID, the awareness around food waste is higher. So the expectation is that restaurants and food service come back with that focus on food waste reduction. So that has been great news. We want to make sure you know, that continues. So that has been the biggest thing that we've seen, and we've continued through listening to our customers, but also sharing of best practices, finding new food waste interventions, sharing those, learning from each other, and really promoting that, because we do have to emerge stronger. Lucy, what have you seen? What has it been like for you?
Yeah, Christy, thanks for teeing me up. I was just about to jump in to comment on that theme of building stronger. I think that's something we've been working on hard as well. Here in Franklin County, we've been working with a number of food businesses especially, and this was work that had started pre-pandemic, and then we were setting up with a bunch of restaurants to understand what it looked like to reduce food waste in their space. And then the pandemic struck and they all shut down. And so while that was, of course, a challenge for us internally to get the projects back up and running, it did give us this really interesting insight into what does this coming back online process look like. There's a lot of this, you know, get started and shut back down, get started and shut back down as the regulations and safety instructions change around operations. But also there's the forward and back on the restaurant owners and kitchen managers side as well of, you know, I'm going to start purchasing food again, but I have no idea how many people are coming into my restaurant. What is the current perception of what is safe? How many people are just sick of the pandemic and are going to go out anyway? And so there's just a lot of considerations for these kitchen managers to balance, and how are they ordering food? And so I have found it to be so interesting to work with these restaurants and to share with them the opportunities around food donations specifically, because it's something that they're not necessarily aware that they can do. Many of them think that the health department doesn't want them to be donating food. So that's something we've done a lot of education on. We even have a brochure that went out through Columbus Public Health that went to every licensed food business in the city, just with basic information on food donation. Yes, you are allowed to do it. Here's how to do it safely. And so information like that is hugely helpful. But then the next step is, okay, I want to do it. I don't have time. My food business is just struggling to survive right now, make it through this COVID time. And so what a lot of our learnings has been, how can you get the direct contact into these restaurant owners' hands of, this is the person I need to talk to when I have excess food? And how, like, what does that process look like? How do I need to package it? How do I need to label it to make sure that it's safe and makes it to the right person? So lots of learnings through this COVID time around food donation, but also composting as well. I mean, it's something that is always a need, but more and more the costs are prohibitive for food businesses since there is that additional cost associated with donation. And so it's something we continue to push. It's something that we continue to see restaurants having a high interest in. It's just a matter of timing and building the infrastructure in our community so that we can bring those prices down and make it practical for food businesses to participate.
Follow-up question to that too. Have you seen that if consumers are thinking that they're wasting more now that they're kind of seeing it more in the kitchen, have you seen an increase in composting at all, or increase in interest there?
It's a great question, and it's a hard thing to collect data on. So SWACO, as the Solid Waste Authority, we do periodic waste characterization studies. Unfortunately, these are not the best way to grab snapshots, on any given week. It's a process that we go through once every 3 to 5 years. And so our last waste characterization study gave us lots of interesting data where we learned this 15% of material entering the landfill is food. But one area that Dr. Rowe may have mentioned earlier that we're hoping will share some interesting insights is Brian and I have been partnering on an engagement with the city of Upper Arlington here in Franklin County. And so what we're doing there is we recently launched this food waste awareness campaign called Save More Than Food. And we want to understand what are the impacts of the campaign? Is it actually driving behavior change? But as part of that, we had to set a baseline of, okay, what's actually happening in our communities now so that we can then implement the campaign and see if there's a difference. And so what we did to set that baseline was we did a week-long waste audit process. So we collected the trash from about 200 households who volunteered to participate. So we had a team physically sorting through every bit of their trash, so the material in their trash can, to understand, okay, how much of this is food, first of all, and then is it packaged food? Is it rotted food? Is it meat, produce, dairy? What's actually ending up in the trash can? And so in addition to setting the baseline for our study, it's also providing this kind of broader understanding of what's happening in this community around food waste. And I wonder, Brian, do you have, I know we've just recently got back some of our survey and waste audit results, but if you have anything high level you wanted to share from what we learned.
A lot of fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
That's the most popular category of waste from the initial round of audits.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Oh, did you have something to add, Dr. Rowe? No. Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting. Just seeing, I think as No Food Waste, we had a couple initiatives we were working on before COVID, and they changed, and the focus changes to safety, and so trying to find ways to reduce waste while also making sure that we're keeping things packaged properly, and it's very interesting. And Alex, now I'm going to pivot a little bit. So I want to start talking about food waste at Ohio State. So if you want to fill us in this past year, what has Ohio State and food waste been looking like? I know we had some initial discussions. Campus dining has changed. So yeah, if you want to tell us what that looks like and what food waste is looking like on campus right now.
Sure. So obviously a lot of things have changed, and it's hard to compare semester to semester because a lot of things have been different. Locations are closing, hours are different. In last fall, when students weren't as dorms as much, there wasn't as much food waste. We're seeing, like, week to week compared to last year, about a 40% reduction. But we're not sure how much of that is due to students not eating or students not being there or just not as much food in general. So it's kind of hard to talk about where that results come from. Food waste at Ohio State in general, it's been, in my time here, managers and all of our shareholders and all the partners that we work with have become much more involved and much more open to helping us and championing this cause. We've been able to expand to multiple different new locations. We're still trying to do that now, even though COVID has kind of thrown a wrench in that. We've seen a lot of increased student interest in this as well. So I think that from a high level, the message has been successfully received by students. They're no longer thinking just in the dining hall and tossing out trays of food. And conversations with our volunteers and people we interact with a lot, there's a lot more mindfulness and intention of what's happening now, especially I think during COVID. because that's much more of a pressing issue with students. So overall, there's a lot of work to be done, obviously, but in my past few years at Food Recovery, we've definitely seen a lot of hope and a lot of really great initiatives moving forward.
And what is the most wasted food on campus?
So by far and away, looking at the list of all the data we've collected, you'll be very shocked to learn that bagels is the #1 culprit. We have a lot of theories behind that. Probably they're very, very cheap to order in bulk. So it's not that big of a deal to overproduce and then, toss away if students don't purchase them. That's kind of the root of where a lot of our special projects have come from. Working with Seven Sun Brewery to make bagel beer, that came out of more desperation than anything else, trying to find some constructive way to get rid of the bagels, because all of our partners that we worked with in the community didn't really have the capacity to take them because, they're not as nutritious as some of the other things that we were donating. So we were all, running around trying to find something to do with them. Currently, we're composting. That's kind of our primary way to try to upcycle that. But we did that, and we're working in collaboration with No Food Waste to try to upcycle them into bagel chips that we can sell back on campus as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So we have a bagel chip project going on. I'll give a little bit of background on that for everyone. So with Food Recovery Network, we have been recovering some of the wasted bagels on campus. And we are working right now on doing, actually, we just had our pilot trial and hoping to sell them on campus eventually as an upcycled product. And so there are some food scientists were originally the founders of No Food Waste. And so we kind of take this approach of food waste in this upcycling new kind of field that is happening. So I'm curious what everyone's experiences with upcycling is. And just for those on the call, when we say upcycling, we're talking about adding value back into food that would otherwise be wasted. Like what Alex was saying, if you're taking these bagels that can no longer be sold, we're upcycling them. So we're producing them into a beer or into a bagel chip that we can sell again. So Kari, I guess, I know there's been the Upcycled Food Association is newly founded. Has Kroger, are they interested in that? What is Kroger saying on all this?
We love Turner over at the Upcycled Food Association. They've been a recipient of some of our grants. They do a tremendous job. And I think it's really interesting because we have an innovation team for our brands. So you think Kroger has got obviously Kroger brand, but we've got Simple Truth and we've got Private Selection and all these other brands. So there's a whole team of people that are just looking out for food trends and bringing new products to the team to entice customers. And one of those ideas is this upcycled and the zero waste concept around food. And it's something that is really, really growing. It's really exciting. We look for upcycled products for both ingredients. So there are grains and flours and wheats and things that are byproducts from production that can be used into products or just the products themselves. So banana is a really fun one that we sell in our stores. That's taking bananas that aren't sold in retail and transforming them into chips for snacks, similar to your bagel concept. And then in our innovation fund, we have Ripe Revival and Seal the Seasons, both of which are taking surplus food from farm and transforming it to a new product to bring to market to sell either in our stores or other places as well. It's definitely an upcoming trend that the team at Kroger is looking at and hoping to bring to market. And I will say you can actually take food byproducts and make it into non-food items. So one of the coolest ones I've talked to recently is an organization that's working to take spent coffee grains and extracting oils from them for beauty products and personal care products. So you can even upcycle into non-food items, which is really exciting.
Kari, one of the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste first funding was a company that was turning food waste into plastic bags. Any updates on whether they've
Mobius.
Yes?
Yeah, they're doing a great job. I haven't caught up with them recently, but Mobius, I can put a link to their website in here. yeah, they're taking organic waste and creating more things like plastic film replacement and things like that. So there's definitely a wide variety of opportunity. We are actually looking to replace single-use plastic bags in our stores and are part of an organization called Beyond the Bag. And some of the applicants to that take things like food waste or algae and turn them into plastic film replacements. So the waste world is very interconnected, that's for sure.
And I'd love to hop in and share. So Kari spoke to a number of innovations that, we're on the same page trying to bring those innovations into Central Ohio as well. But a lot of those innovations kind of work in the manufacturing level and the commercial level, kind of what happens behind the scenes before the food gets to you as a consumer, or even kind of at the restaurant level. So there's additional opportunities for food upcycling that happens at the commercial kitchen level, whether it be restaurants, food businesses, cafeterias, places like OSU's cafeterias. And we've seen examples of organizations who focus on rescuing that food and repurposing it into kind of reformatting it or transforming it into meals that can be served immediately to local communities and community members. And so I know one example, and Kari knows who I'm talking about here, would be La Soup in Cincinnati. They do exactly that work. They just collect excess food from local restaurants and make sure that it's in the right format to be served to others as meals. So whether that's just directly taking excess food from a restaurant to a hungry community member, or actually they receive some donation from Kroger as well, turning those raw ingredients into a ready to go meal. So it's as accessible as possible to community members. And so that's something I know I saw in the chat, someone was asking about if that's something that we have here in Columbus. Unfortunately, we don't have as much of that full transformation of the food so that it's a meal ready to go, but it's something that we're looking to expand. So La Soup's model is based on Food Rescue US, and they're an active partner of ours here in Central Ohio. And so they're growing their presence. And I think, something that we're always in conversation about is how do we get that next step, that transformation process, so that these meals are ready to go for community members.
I can add just a little bit of something that we're seeing, but it's pretty much has always been there in many ways. It's actually cost in the favor of cost for restaurants to use as much as they can and not waste. However, what I found is that they kind of forget what they know. Sometimes you have chefs that'll change, you have to start the process over, you've got new staff, seasonally, all these things happen over and over and over. So it's not like, I guess the biggest takeaway I would say is, yes, you have orange peels, you can make them into a chutney or candy. You can do all these things with all these items that you hear people making new dishes or soups or stocks and all of this. But I think the important thing is once you get there, staying there and continuing to innovate is what I see as really interesting. So hearing about the bagel beer, for example, and the chips, those are great. So awesome. And I think that's where you see seasoned professionals that continue to strive. But I think it's great. So no matter if you're going out to your restaurant or to your dining hall, continue to ask the questions, because sometimes we need a little push to remember. You might have new staff or something else, but to continue to innovate. So it's nice to know people are paying attention. So encourage you to reach out.
Do you think post-COVID there's going to be a lot of turnover, or do you think we're just going to get back the people who have a lot of experience, and so that's going to be kind of the core experience folks?
Brian, there's a couple of things going on right now, and I think one that you can't ignore that has nothing to do with food waste, but is wages of workers and those that have been furloughed and perhaps don't need to come back because it's in their interest not to come back right now based on what they're getting. And that is a huge impact to the food service industry right now in restaurants. And I see Kari's face and probably in the grocery stores and everywhere. So education, that's part of why Emerge Stronger is so important, because we also have to remember that we've all been through some tough times. But I think, whether you're in the food bank or the restaurant industry, but people have, friends that they've been working with for 20 years are no longer next to them. And so you can't let go of the mental space of that. So anyway, Brian, to answer your question, well, how do I think that's going to happen? Yes, what we've seen already is because of food production records, that historical data, it's out the door. It doesn't exist. It doesn't matter. Even if it's there, it just doesn't matter. So the one thing that actually has been consistent and good with the LeanPath data is that's almost become the production information, because you can see yesterday what happened. You can see what you produced, what's left over. And so it's a little bit harder to innovate and have some of those upsells because you don't know how many people are coming in today. You don't know how many you had yesterday. So, so some of that innovation is tougher. It's not going to be great, Brian. I don't have a good statistic for you right now, but I think it's going to be a struggle. That's why I think this awareness is so important, and thinking through this is important. But the great upside, because I said a lot of bad things, but the upside to this is you do have these people that coming in that, you know, many people are excited to be out again, interacting with each other and talking and working together. And so that in itself is going to, how we restart, how we share best practices from simple knife skills is really important, because what we see in restaurants and food service too is the largest food waste is that vegetable, but it's trim waste. It's so like it's tops or peels, but things that can be used at times. So we've got a large opportunity still to make some impact, I think.
Yeah, I would guess this is going to mess up any demand forecasting by restaurants. So being able to forecast how many people are going to come through your front door is critical to make sure to reduce food waste. But
exactly,
wow, it's going to be so tough to predict that. So there's probably going to be some bumps as the reopenings happen in terms of the amount of waste.
Yeah, as consumers, I would say, and I think we're doing this already, but be kind and be patient, because you know we might run out of things, and you get something fresh, but that's part of it. That's a trade-off, and so everybody, I think, is doing the best they can with the information they have.
Awesome, yeah, great discussion. It's an interesting time we're living in. So I'm going to shift this a little bit towards the policy and economics kind of idea behind food waste. And so, Dr. Rowe, if you could you just give us a little bit of like background on how some of your research has led to kind of actionable changes in the way that economics and this policy kind of play a role in food waste?
Sure. I mean, policy can happen on a number of fronts. The work that we did in coordination with ReFed that Aishwarya and some others, you know, Catherine, looked at the question of which date label phrases might be the best to settle upon. And we found that there's some slight differences in terms of when people were looking at phrases and whether they thought that would trigger them to potentially discard perfectly good food or not. But we didn't find that the phrase was a big thing. We found that the date was the huge mover. And there are a lot of products for which the date is on shelf stable products, products that are pasteurized at a very high temperature, where those dates are largely about the quality peak rather than the safety peak. And so I think there is scope here, and it's so good to hear Kroger uniformly implement on their own products date phrases that are consistent. But to really make this work at a national level, there needs to be a national level coordination. And I know some of the manufacturing groups have settled on particular phrases that they're interested in, but even pushing that up and getting some guidance and perhaps some legislation that would help settle upon phrases that can be transitioned to over the next couple of years would then really help us organize information campaigns and consumer campaigns so that everybody's on the same page and knows when various phrases indicate a date that's just has something to do with quality versus one where there are probably safety implications. And we know there are products out there, soft cheeses, deli meats, any products that might have pathogens that don't go through, that aren't properly cooked before they're consumed. So, but just having some policy that would organize that could be a nice consumer tool. The National Academies of Sciences also came out with some interesting policy ideas, perhaps on the solid waste front as well. Back in the early 2000s, it was seen that about maybe a quarter of communities across the United States had something known as pay as you throw. So the more garbage that you throw into the solid waste, the more you would pay by buying special bags or having some type of variable fee. And we think that's potentially a scope for pursuing across communities in the country as well, because obviously as consumers become aware that, oh, I have to pay more to throw more out, then what's one thing that you want to throw out less of? Well, food waste would be one that you'd like to throw out less of as well. And so being able to couple maybe an expansion of pay as you throw, which can be, obviously every community is going to be different. It's not going to fly in every community. And there may be some income distribution issues as well. You may have to make sure to protect those in the lowest income categories from additional fees. But there are probably ways to adjust those so that people become more conscious and think about that last stage and are more careful about what they're deciding to put into their garbage cans. And hopefully coupling that with more composting availability will help people see the light, recognize to reduce food waste. So just a couple policy issues that I'm seeing out there being tossed about, and I'll let others chime in here as well.
Yeah, I would love to build on that, just the comment about this composting infrastructure issue. I mentioned earlier that SWACO is looking at what can it mean for our region if we were to build this composting facility that could manage the region's food waste. And it has huge implications for not only our capacity to process the food waste itself, but our capacity to engage our residents on what they can do. So right now we have a number of food waste or composting and diversion opportunities for recycling in our communities, things like community drop-off programs where you can take your food waste to a specific site to be dropped off. But down the line, we would love to see things like curbside collection of composting and things like organic waste bans or pay-as-you-throw systems that really incentivize people. Hey, not only is this the right thing to do, you're going to save money, and it's really easy and convenient too. But the big picture on that is that you need the right system to be able to manage that material. You can't tell people they can't put their food waste in the trash if there's nowhere else for them to put it. And so just kind of that important background knowledge. We have a lot of these communities around the country, especially places like Vermont has the food waste ban. Out in California, you see a lot of communities, or out west, a lot of communities with these bans. But we need that infrastructure first. And so I'm really excited to be part of the team that's doing that research, starting to understand who are the composters who can manage all of that material. What are the models that we see across the country that we want to learn from, and how can we get that done here locally? So another kind of just the context around some of those policy opportunities is really exciting to see it taking shape here locally.
Yeah, I'll just comment really quickly on the date labeling. We actually ran into issues on that regulations were inhibiting our ability to do the date labeling standardization. So there are some communities that mandate milk or eggs have sell by dates, and they're very clear about, like, it must say sell by. So a national standard would be really helpful, because if we have, a handful of states that say eggs must say sell by, then we can't separate that. So now all across the country, all of our eggs say sell by rather than a use by, or something more conducive and universal. So there is opportunity to, on the other side, to decrease some regulation to allow for more uniformity across multiple states.
And I'm wondering, does anyone know in other countries, are the regulations similar, or do they have more regulation on some of this stuff? Because I think in Europe there are some countries that do composting and maybe are a little more ahead on some of this.
Brian probably has more detail, but European countries are far ahead of us on these issues of food waste, and even in some Asian countries as well, just because they've got so much to manage. But definitely the United States is infrastructure-wise well behind European.
I know in Seoul, you have Seoul, Korea, there's pay by how much you have to take your food waste to very particular receptacles and you pay per pound. So I know they're very integrated there. Christy, you were going to say something.
Yeah, a very similar thing, but as well as there's definitely some food service, even let's just imagine at McDonald's, something simple like that. But the food service company actually hires people to collect the waste because the fines are so high that if there's contamination, it's cheaper for them to hire people to sort the waste than it is to get the fines. So there's definitely some offsets with a lot of anaerobic digestion as well. That's strong in the European countries, but yeah, there's definitely some reasons to not waste and infrastructure as well out there.
And Dave, I'm wondering if you can touch on policy in terms of food donations, and do you find that there are still challenges? I think I can't remember who was mentioning that sometimes retailers don't think that they should donate or are worried about safety and things like that. So can you touch on that policy?
Well, certainly, you know, we all benefit from the let's see if I've got this on right. We all benefit from the Good Samaritan laws, which really take away the liability associated with donation. And we also try to talk in terms of kind of the business benefits of donating rather than you know, putting it into your tipping fees, because we can save folks lots of money from that perspective. Brian talked about the importance of getting consistent, you know, verbiage with respect to use by, sell by, best by dates. We do benefit from many manufacturers who will grant us extensions beyond that date. So if it does, you know, we've got a list of those letters. You know, Feeding America does a wonderful job keeping track of by manufacturer. You know, a Dannon yogurt may get a 2-week extension beyond the sell by date for us to be able to distribute it. So that keeps it out of the waste stream. There's lots of education that has to go on because there's a lot of folks that are just very, squeamish about, you know, hey, do I want to give this to my family from that standpoint? But certainly, you know, there's Food Saver, there's Food Keeper, there's a lot of different websites out there that has, you know, some very common, information with respect to canned goods, baked goods, and so forth. But you know, it's really gets down to the level of risk associated with the pathogen that might be involved.
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
We just had a comment in here that the Columbus Zoo drops off several tons of compost to farms. And I guess, Lucy, I want to ask you another question that you were talking about. Are you okay, Dave? Is he freezing?
Yeah, I'm good.
Oh, okay. So I think you kind of touched on the infrastructure stuff, especially related to composting. So how do you see us combating that challenge? And can you explain a little bit more what these challenges are? Like, we could introduce policy, but we have to have somewhere for this to go.
Yeah, so this, you know, one big step is just getting this infrastructure itself a physical place where the compost or food waste and yard waste also can be delivered to be processed. Maybe clarify your question a little bit. Are you curious to learn more about kind of the steps to get to those policy actions, or more around which part?
Yeah, I guess both. So one of the challenges that we've run into with no food waste is that OSU wants to compost. And so Alex, I don't know if you're more redistributing. I don't know if you have any experience at OSU with some of these kind of policy things, but OSU has switched to compostables. Most students on this call might have realized that. However, the big challenge is we want to compost, we just don't have a place to send it economically. And so can you just maybe explain that to someone who's not as familiar with how that works and what these challenges are?
Yeah, so I mean, right now, what it often looks like, I guess at the foundational level, we need to understand, I think some people have this impression that, food will degrade or break down and essentially compost no matter where it is. That's not necessarily true. So the landfill is an aerobic space, which means that there is no access to oxygen. All this food is kind of locked into place in the landfill. And so one example that I like to give, you have something like a head of iceberg lettuce. In a composting system that would break down in, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, it'll be broken down into nothing in a good composting system. Within the landfill, that same head of iceberg lettuce will still be identifiable as a head of iceberg lettuce 25 years later. And so that space, that locked into the landfill space, makes a huge difference. And so you can't really compare composting systems to the landfill, even though it may, from the outside perspective, looks like you're just, having the food sit in a pile somewhere. It's very different. But so a little bit more around the infrastructure or what it takes to create that composting ability in a community. So right now we have compost haulers, private industries who are offering services in Franklin County, groups like Go Zero Services. Innovative Organics is another who's been recently operating Compost Exchange Organics. And so these operators help us to have outlets, and they have their own composting facilities that operate kind of around the region. These sites are designed to serve the capacity of the hauler, so the one who's physically picking up the material, taking it to the facility, dropping it off. And they design their pricing around what it takes to do all of those steps, the processing the material, the picking up the material. And because we don't have too much competition going on in our region at the moment, the price points can be really high. So I know in working with some of our restaurants, for kind of a smaller restaurant, they're looking at something like $500 for every 2 weeks, I believe. And for a larger facility who's producing a lot more food waste, the numbers just keep going up from there. And so that's kind of out of the price point. But so even though you have all these organizations like OSU trying to do the right thing, buy compostable materials, it doesn't have the same impact unless it makes it to the composting infrastructure. And so that is a lot of the motivation behind developing this composting facility, is that by developing a public-private partnership, we have a government organization, SWACO, who's willing to take on some of that extra cost, provide the land for the facility itself, make it more feasible for a large-scale composter to come into the region. So that we can make sure we are serving the good of our community, which is to compost as much material as possible and keep it out of the landfill.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, as more compostable items come into the market, it's actually really, really not great because we don't have curbside composting. And so a lot of people are doing a great job building their own compost in their backyard, but a lot of those things like silverware and all these other things that claim to be compostable, they are in that facility that Lucy's mentioning, not in your backyard. It's not going to have that same process. And so we are innovating on the marketplace, really, really great, but we're not helping ourselves on the other end of it by having these facilities and this infrastructure built up. So customers are becoming more aware about compostable things like bags. But unfortunately, we are not doing developing as rapidly on the management side of the equation, and it's creating actually a bit of a clog in the system.
And part of the overall issue is that it's still very inexpensive, particularly in the Midwest, to put things in a landfill. The tipping fees are the price that people pay to put items in a landfill. And on the coasts, because of land space is so dear, and in certain states where they've got a particular approach, it's obviously a difficult thing to actually increase tipping fees, because that changes the entire infrastructure and the economic model for a lot of companies. But it does change incentives to compost, and it's probably something to think about as a policy lever, a big policy lever that could have big effects, but not a quick or easy decision for a region to make.
Yeah, I think those points are well taken by SWACO. For example, I know we think hard, and I've been looking at some of the modeling lately. We're thinking about, okay, to what degree can we subsidize this for our community? We want this to happen. So how can we take away the costs to our residents? You know, if we were to implement a curbside system, That's a lot of cost for the communities to take on, to provide the bins for the compost to sit in and at your curb, to pay for that service, to have it picked up and taken away. So we're looking at what we can do to subsidize those costs, as well as, the processing itself and all of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Not an easy fix, any of this stuff. So we will move to audience questions in a moment, but first I want to ask, we'll start with Alex, and I want to ask everyone just what can students do? What do you recommend if we're on campus? Maybe a lot of us are interested in food waste. What can we do to help this issue?
Sure. So I think that for students especially, thinking about food waste is just very overwhelming, and it's a very large, big, complex problem, and they don't know what to do or how to help. I was one of those students originally, and good news is that there are like 1,001 organizations you can join at Ohio State to make a difference. And even small scale stuff is a huge impact. And by volunteering your time or your effort or whatever, you're going to make a difference. And I'd also say, as a student, people are like really more willing to listen to you in industry or in academia than you think they are. Like a lot of our really cool projects just started out with a weird cold call email, and they decided to take a chance and help us out and help out food waste and stuff like that. And we ended up doing these really cool projects. So I'd say that you have a lot more power than you think you do. And all you really need is a little bit of just effort, motivation, intuition, and you can do something really cool that makes a big difference.
I might just say that so many students end up working in food service at some point in their college careers as a side job, that just bringing that up with whoever you're working for, maybe not the first student or the second student, but like the 15th or 20th student who says something, maybe the recalcitrant food service or retailer might then give something a try.
Yeah, I'll build on Dr. Rowe's comment there. I think, as you mentioned, kind of bringing that up to food service managers and in your jobs in your own life. We know that 40% of food waste happens at the individual level. And so there's so much that you can do just by changing your own habits. And then also there's so many resources out there to help you make that change. So I'll mention again, we have the Save More Than Food campaign from SWACO. We have pages dedicated specifically to here's how to make a difference in these different locations. And so one of them is, how do you make a difference at home? And it takes you through all kinds of resources, everything prevention, recipes, how to meal plan for the week, how to use up leftovers, how to find local composters who are working in our region, everything that you can do at home. But then there's also, if you are working in that food service job and you want to tell your manager, hey, food waste is important and it's happening all over the place. Also, here's a resource that's going to help you reduce it. You can find that on Save More Than Food as well. We have Save More Than Food at work or in food businesses. And so you can take a look at there's best practices, guides for different types of kind of models and scales, as well as all kinds of local resources. Again, the compost operators in the region, food donation resources, all of that as well. So that can be really cool to have the language and the enthusiasm for the topic, but also there's some resources to back it up can go a long way.
Lucy, just a question. I'm curious if SWACO's still doing landfill tours, or if like Know Your Food and Food Recovery have you all went and toured it? Because I think it's pretty amazing. So if you're thinking about something to make an impact, that will blow your mind. And that's sort of my question, but yeah.
Yeah, no, Christy, I think you make a great point. I remember it was my first week on the job at SWACO. I went into the landfill and I walked out and said, I'm never using a plastic bag ever again. Because you walk into that space and you just see, this is what's being wasted. This is the scale. This is what's happening every single day. This stuff is just being bulldozed into our space, into the landfill. And so really, really motivating. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we're not offering in-person tours at the moment. But if you're up for another Zoom session, we do offer virtual landfill tours. I haven't been able to participate on one yet, but I've heard that they're really great and really informative. You get a chance to get all your questions answered about not only how does the landfill work, but kind of what are the materials coming in, what are those other diversion opportunities beyond food waste and plastics and any other type of material you encounter in your everyday life.
That's definitely something that we are going to talk about as no food waste. So thanks for throwing that out, Christy. Kari, do you want to just mention to students something that what you recommend?
Sure. Yeah. So, there's been a lot of really great ideas already, but, I just really think about how you're consuming food, look at your own experiences and make small changes, right? So small changes every once in a while can really add up to a big difference. And so just really thinking about your own habits. I also would love to plug the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste Foundation. If you'd like to contribute to that and our efforts there, you can round up at your local Kroger. We do a tremendous job in our Columbus division of running that program. And so I would suggest that. And then also, once the COVID world opens up again, get out there and volunteer. Mid-Ohio, I'm sure, is ready to get volunteerism back up and running, and as well as organizations like Keep Columbus Beautiful, places like that. Just get out there, get to know your community, get to know the problems that are in it and ways that you can help solve.
Go ahead, Dave.
Sure, I'll just tap in on the idea with respect to volunteerism. We are accepting volunteers. We have been since the early part of August, and we've got all the social distancing and COVID protocols in place to keep everybody safe. But in addition to on-site, pantries throughout, there's a number that are around Ohio State and in neighboring communities that are looking for volunteers all the time from that perspective. As well as, we do a lot of great partnerships with Waterman Farms, and we got a couple of parcels out there that they grow fruits and vegetables on. So somebody that just wants to get their green thumb dirty and wet and go dig in the dirt, I'm pretty sure that they'll be planning in the next few weeks. Opportunities out there for volunteer, and we do, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of, I want to say the second or third week of August is whenever the harvest season starts coming on the fruits and vegetables that they plant for us out there. But a number of students actually get involved.
Awesome. And finally, Christy.
I'm sorry, what was that? Did you say my name?
Do you have any recommendations for students or?
Recommendations? Oh, you know what? I feel like you've hit this for me. One of my favorite organizations, though, is Food Recovery Network. I just have loved working with them for so long. And it's not just to me, and Alex, you'll probably pipe in on this, but to me, it's not just about what you learn in the food recovery, it's the leadership and the other skills that you gain through that engagement. So, I mean, that's just one of my favorites. So I have to plug that one, just to be honest with you. Everybody covered everything else, though. Sorry.
Awesome. So we have a couple audience questions. And so Aishwarya is going to pop back on and ask some of those.
Great. What an amazing discussion. I definitely learned a lot, and there's some really interesting things in the chat going on. We'll definitely share all these links with the attendees. But there's a question about the food safety aspect of food waste. So Allison asked, beyond the legal liability, what steps or policies are in place to ensure that donated or upcycled food products are safe for consumption?
Yeah, I sent a quick note just from the retailer perspective. So any upcycled products that we bring to market would have to go through the same food safety certifications that any other products that brought to market. So that would be regulated by USDA or whoever the agency would be. For donated product, our food safety team is very, very cautious about this exact issue and have very strict procedures in place in stores to make sure that we are taking care to not endanger any of the product before it leaves our stores. And then Dave, if you want to talk about the food bank, I know you guys have really robust protocols in place as well as Feeding America, the parent agency that has just a tremendous food safety team that works on this issue.
Yeah, all of the personnel, starting with drivers, are food safe certified in all of the aspects of food safety. All of our equipment is refrigerated. They have thermometers with their temp checking as they pick the product up. So we follow the cold chain all the way through back to the warehouse. All of our direct retail partners, we have agencies that are going to Kroger stores on a daily basis. They are all food safe certified, and they've got passive devices that they use to keep the product cold from the pickup to the point that it gets back to the destination, so that it gets to the customer. From a processing standpoint, with respect to donated food, dented cans, boxes, etc. Part of the process is inspection to ensure that, again, code with respect to code dates, but also to ensure that there's no contamination of the product, that it's not in any ways traded, so that they ensure that it gets into the system properly.
Especially with the pandemic, I think there's been a huge focus on food waste and food safety as well. We have one more question about food system resilience. Since the onset of the pandemic, we have seen a lot of discussion around making our food system more resilient to shocks like a pandemic. And what role does the food we waste in our households play in food system resilience? Maybe Dr. Rowe can answer this.
Yeah, so consumer food waste to me has always been a priority, because it does have the biggest ripple effect, right? Because by the time the food has gotten to the home, it's been grown, it's been transported, it's been processed, it's probably been transported again, it's been refrigerated perhaps. We've probably put time and effort into getting it into our own homes. And so there's just a lot of energy and resources embedded in it by the time it gets to the consumer level. So, if you get to the real technical definitions of resilience, it's kind of an interesting thing, because you'll hear about redundancies and buffer supplies as being ways to enhance resilience. And so there is a bit of tension that sometimes buffer stocks can be useful to aid resilience, but for fresh items in particular, that's probably not going to be the best way to go to provide system level resilience. Being able to be flexible in both our distribution systems, and be able to be flexible in our own homes to kind of make do with what we have, be creative with the stocks that we have on our shelves, do interesting and lovely things with our leftovers to make ourselves and our household members interested in those, really shows our own resilience, and then that will kind of work its way through the entire system and help provide resilience to the entire system. So I think really allowing, and COVID's done this a bit, it's helped us all kind of channel our inner home ec class from years past, or from whatever we found on YouTube. But continuing that can be helpful and provide resilience to the entire system.
That's a great point. Thank you. On that note, No Food Waste is running a Never Leftover challenge. You can check it out on our social media, and we have linked it to a fundraiser benefiting local matters. So you can repurpose something that was leftover from last night and send us a picture, and we'll feature it on our Instagram. Another interesting question we have here is the solution to zero hunger, zero waste. And I know Food Recovery Network is doing exactly that, taking excess and donating it to food pantries. So maybe Alex and Kari, even you could answer this question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I just couldn't see the question, so go ahead.
Oh, the question is the solution to zero waste is the solution to zero hunger, zero waste?
Right. I think it's an interesting question, and it you know, if you think about 30 to 40%, I mean, you can argue about what it is of food produced has gone to waste, and what impact that food could have had on hunger in America. It's tremendous, to be honest. And the reality is we likely will never get to a perfect zero on food waste here, but even cutting down half of that could potentially solve hunger here. So I do think in a very, you know, hopeful way, yes, the answer is yes. I think in a realistic way, the answer is probably no. There's a lot more that goes into hunger than just repurposing food that's currently getting wasted. But I do think we should strive towards making sure anything that we have produced here in the United States is going to a higher purpose than the landfill. And what that looks like, I think, is different in every community, and how we achieve that is different in every community, but it is a goal that every single person should be striving towards that works in the food industry. And what can we do on in our day-to-day jobs to make that difference, I think is something that I hope anyone that's listening that works in the food industry takes away from this conversation, because it doesn't take a lot to make a major difference in food availability. And what that food availability does is addresses an aspect of hunger, and a really important one.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'd just like to say that, yeah, hey, it is zero waste, zero hunger is very good business practice. And it is, again, it's a great, effort with respect to trying to help out, your neighbor. But one of the things that we clearly understood is that we cannot end hunger with poverty, and we won't end poverty until we end racism. So it is a much broader scope, and that's one of the reasons why we've tried to expand our, from simply, as I said, you can't food bank your way out of hunger is what we've learned. But there's other systemic issues there that we really need to make sure we're addressing along the way. But I applaud all the retailers that are making this effort, because, as I said, this is a great awareness campaign.
We lost him. Well, with that, I think that's all the time we have.
Before you wrap up, I do want to note, I want everybody to know that we've got some award winners on our call here today. On Friday, the university is going to have its Student Leadership Awards, and the Food Recovery Network is going to be named the outstanding club on the entire campus. And there's like a bazillion clubs on OSU campus. And our own Aishwarya Badager here is going to be awarded an individual award for, that's the Scarlet and Green Award for Outstanding Leadership on the sustainability front. So the folks who are organizing this today and part of this panel are outstanding students and doing great work. And we're all very proud of you. So I just wanted to get that recognition in there, and didn't mean to butt in, but I thought that was some pertinent information to share. So back to you, Catherine, sorry.
No, thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. So let me share 1 second. We are going to, so for those of you that stayed on the call, thank you. So we have giveaways for this, and actually a lot of the products that we're giving away, Kari mentioned. So we have some giveaways that will send more information to all of the students or attendees of this call. So keep an eye out for that email. And we want to remind everyone to follow us on social media. These are the links to follow No Food Waste and Citation Needed. And we'd really just like to thank all of the panelists for taking the time to share all of this really insightful information with us. I think all of us are walking away having learned a lot from all of you and all of the important work that you're doing. So thank you for making a difference in the world of food waste and being an inspiration to all of us.
And I'm just going to butt in real quick. If anyone's interested in participating in our virtual food drive benefiting the Buckeye Food Alliance, you can find it at our Instagram at OSU Food Recovery Network.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.